Welcome to the Microbiome Report, powered by BIOHM Health. I am your host, Andrea Wien, and today we have a very special episode as I am joined by three guests. Our first guest is resident researcher, Dr. Mahmoud Ghannoum. Dr. Ghannoum has been doing microbiome research for the last 40 years. His work is funded by the National Institute for Health, and he currently conducts research out of the Case Western Reserve School of Medicine. I also have Afif Ghannoum on the line. Afif is the CEO of BIOHM, a consumer-facing gut health company with a line of products and a gut testing kit. And our third guest is Ben Goodwin, the founder of Olipop, a revolutionary prebiotic soda. Longtime listeners will, of course, recognize all of our guests from previous episodes on a wide range of topics. So this episode was driven 100% by questions posed by our podcast followers and listeners across social media about all things gut health and the microbiome. These are questions like, why should regular healthy people care about the microbiome? What foods are easiest and hardest to digest? What does the ideal diet look like? Is gut health related to thyroid health? And what's the best course of action to take when trying to figure out digestive issues? We talk about all of these things and a lot more on this episode. And while we weren't able to get to every single question on the show, many of the questions asked can be answered by other episodes of the podcast. So if you don't hear your question on today's show, or if you're interested in getting more specifics around something, head to biohmhealth.com/pages/podcast, where I've included a long list of questions, corresponding episodes, and extra resources for you to peruse. If you have other questions you want us to dig into in the future, please don't be shy about emailing me at themicrobiomereport@gmail.com. Let's get to the show. Hey guys, thanks so much for being on the line.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, our pleasure.
Great pleasure. Thank you.
So this is, we'll see how this goes. This is our first episode where we've had multiple people on the line. So, we have a lot of questions to get through today from listeners and followers of BIOHM. These questions all came, just so everyone knows, from our social media channels. So people had an opportunity over the last few weeks to ask these questions. And now we have some experts on the line to talk about them. So a lot of them, as I mentioned in the intro, are podcast episodes that we've already done. So we didn't talk about a lot of general questions, but I do want to start with just one for the group. Why should regular people care about the health of their microbiome? Why is this important?
Oh my God, so many reasons. One of you two want to pick it up, get it started?
Yeah, I think the general thing to think about and be aware of is that increasingly what the science is showing is that your GI, your microbiome, is tied to a number of different health outcomes. Now, the tricky part with that is you'll hear people talk about gut-brain axis, stress and mood. You'll talk about even pain. You'll talk about potentially even cancers, like all sorts of conditions. But, one word of caution, I always like to throw out there is that microbiome science is very much in the age of correlation, potential causation. But we're trying to figure that part out. But what the science is showing, and, I'll call him Dad, Dr. Ghannoum can expound on this, but there's definitely a connection between the two. So really, microbiome health is critical because it does seem to be tied to many different parts of our health and wellness.
Yeah, I really agree. When people started looking at the microbiome, they just tried to understand what is there. And the good news is that they moved into the next phase, which is try to see, okay, does the presence of certain organisms, whether it's in our gut or on our body, in the skin, affect our health? And now we are starting, as Afif mentioned, correlative studies. Even sometimes we are starting to see more causes as well as the science is being developed. And I really think what's exciting about this, with this background, now people are starting to think the third phase of the microbiome to say, okay, we know it affects different parts of our body. So now how we can rebalance this microbiome so that we have better health and wellness. So I'm sure Ben can add to this as well.
Yeah, I'm not in disagreement with anything you guys have said. The reason why I've been more or less focusing on it from a formulation standpoint for actually the last 15 years or so is precisely what the two of you have pointed towards, which is the kind of systemic implications of microbiome health on the greater body. So to Afif's point, brain-gut axis, even things like hormone production. One of the things that I find really, really interesting is it's not just about the microorganisms that are present in the digestive tract and the digestive microbiome. It's also how what you're feeding them might generate different metabolic outputs. So different, based on the food sources going into what's basically an unsupervised biochemical reactor in your digestive tract. It's going to impact what compounds all these different organisms basically ferment and turn into metabolites, which then are going to have chain reactions in the microbiome and have different impacts in the human body, including like immune system, stuff like that. So it's a very interesting system in that it affects so many other parts of the body. The other thing I would point out is, and this is one of the reasons I think that I focused to work on it, and I'm sure it has some influence on the two of your approach as well, but the only other areas of the body that I can think of that have such a global impact would be, literally the brain and the greater nervous system and maybe genetic expression. And those two areas of the body are going to be substantially harder to impact through supplementation and through lifestyle in the way that you can impact the microbiome. So that's not one of the other things about it that I think is it's an area of the body that has these systemic implications. It's also a lot safer to influence with diet and lifestyle and supplementation than the other areas of the body that may have a similar effect and happens to affect those two areas of the body as well. So I think it's also pretty interesting from that lens.
I really think Ben brought up a very, very important point. So in addition to the diet, lifestyle is very, very critical in how our microbiome is maintained and rebalanced. It's very important, for example, 3 different things with respect to lifestyle: the exercise, moderate exercise, stress. We are all stressed, especially in this day with the COVID and the way of life we are leading. It's a really different world that definitely can affect our microbiome. And finally, sleep. People are not sleeping very well. Also, it will impact it. So what you need to do is try to understand what's there and how we can really influence through the diet, the lifestyle, and other activities, which will be very important for gaining a overall wellness.
Just to jump in, we do have some questions to get into that a bit more down the line, but I just want to stop you guys and take a quick step back, because we had a lot of questions just generally about what constitutes symptomatology of an unhealthy or a healthy digestive system and gut. So for example, how do I know if I have a poor microbiome or microbial imbalance or just a food allergy or intolerance? Questions like, why am I suffering from gas and bloating? Is that tied to poor microbiome? Is it what I'm eating? So I just want to kind of lay the groundwork of people don't know which side of the fence they're on here. So how do you think about the common and uncommon signs of digestive health?
So let me jump in and add sort of a science-like perspective on this, right? So when we look at our data from our microbiome test, a lot of times when people are reporting having digestive issues, what we'll notice is that their diet can typically be pretty poor, right? So the problem is it's not necessarily always that they have sort of a standing unbalanced microbiome. A lot of times they're going back to what we just talked about, lifestyle, diet, they're doing things that are proactively probably impacting the balance of their microbiota. So a lot of times it does become a little bit of, chicken or egg, right? So you may not be only experiencing digestive issues because of the fact your microbiome is imbalanced. You may actually be contributing to it. Now, what gets tricky sometimes is the changes that people need to make to start coming in balance can sometimes be digestively uncomfortable. I'll give you a simple
It's
example.
a great point, Afif. Yeah.
Yeah, because we've seen this. So there was one guy, former UFC fighter that came to us, guy who looks like he's cut out of marble, tries to eat well. And he kept saying to us, like, I every time I try and go mostly plant-based, I just feel so bloated, so uncomfortable. And, we kind of forced the issue and said, listen, you have to stick with it. your body's not used to it, right? So you don't have the enzymes built up. You really have to give your body a chance to adapt. Then you'll start feeling better. And sure enough, you saw that. So a lot of times the symptoms people are experiencing, it's in large part, self-created a lot of times.
So maybe I just want to talk about these symptoms so that really responding to the question, what are the common symptoms? First of all, you know that you have digestive issues. Really, the way is to look at yourself. You have discomfort in your digestive tract. And this can be seen through a number of symptoms: nausea, vomiting, for example, lack of appetite or excessive appetite. Sometimes you have sore tongue, mouth ulcers, swollen gums, bloating. Everybody talks about that, belching, flatulence, of course, diarrhea and constipation also. So there are a number of things that can tell you have a digestive issue or unhealthy gut. But in addition to this, which was alluded to before with respect to the gut-brain axis or gut-skin-brain axis, you may have issues of mood, lethargy, as well as some skin issues. All of these could tell you that you may have a really unhealthy gut.
So I'll pop in. I mean, basically I'm probably in the worst position to speak to symptomology, and it probably wouldn't even be advisable from a legal perspective because I'm not a doctor. And we actually are doing some of our own research with Olipop, with Purdue and Baylor College of Medicine, but still doesn't feel appropriate to necessarily speak to people's symptoms. But I think one of the things, there's two things I'll kind of pop in with. One of the things is something that I've actually already covered, Andrew, with you on some of the prior podcasts, which is kind of the relational composition of what happens in the microbiome in relation to how it impacts people. So, there's unfortunately this chain reaction that can occur when we're not getting the proper nutrient inputs. And specifically in the Western world, it's these three pillars I've talked about before. It's fiber, prebiotics, and nutritional diversity broadly, which obviously includes diverse micronutrient profiles. If we aren't getting enough of those kind of key nutrients, we end up underfeeding the microorganisms, nourishing other ones that might lead to an imbalance. The other issue there being is that if truly these microorganisms, certain microorganisms, are basically starving, they're going to turn to and start eating away at that mucosal layer that lives in your digestive tract, that separates the contents of your digestive tract from your epithelial cell wall layer. As that layer becomes more and more thin, you're going to end up start having these undesirable interactions between the contents of your digestive tract and the tight junctions in your epithelial cell wall layer, which is going to end up leading to discomfort and inflammation and immune system hyperactivity. If you're chronically inflamed, then you're going to be chronically uncomfortable. If your immune system's hyperreacting all the time, that's going to make you exhausted and lethargic. And those issues unaddressed for an extended period of time can also then lead to kind of endocrine system issues. So there's a big chain reaction there. And that's one of the reasons why, despite not really being able to speak to symptomologies and certainly not being able to speak to disease states, one of the things that I really recommend that people take a look at is just kind of it's really hard because of the state of microbiome science and the state of microbiome testing, because we're usually doing fecal tests, which have a host of challenges intrinsically associated with them in terms of truly getting comprehensive, accurate data. So try to just stick to solid principles around nutrient inputs for digestive and microbiome health. And obviously our belief system is that's making sure you're getting enough fiber, prebiotics, and nutritional diversity. And the only other thing I'll piggyback on really quickly is, that point that Afif made around, that there might be some discomfort during changes in diet is super, super true. There's actually some really good Italian research that there's a physician in Italy that was doing, where he was actually using prebiotics to try to help people get off of chronic FODMAP diets. And as you can imagine, one of the key FODMAPs tends to be oligosaccharides. Well, one of the most well-researched prebiotics is the oligosaccharide family. So as he was putting these FODMAP, long-term FODMAP patients on oligosaccharide-rich diets, there's a lot of discomfort and gas and bloating and pain. He titrated up the amounts of oligosaccharides over time, and he did find that titration did help to reduce discomfort. And as the patients became acclimated, they actually were able to start shifting away from their FODMAP diets for the first time in years. And obviously that's just one study, but it does kind of point to it. I think one thing that this is probably a little bit above most people's pay grades in terms of like what they want to spend their time thinking about, but it's worthy of noting that your microbiome is like an entire ecosystem. So there's primary fermenters, there's secondary fermenters, there's tertiary fermenters, like the list goes on and on. So there's a whole group of organisms that just eat the food that you're eating. And then there's a whole group of organisms that just eat the byproducts from that first group of organisms, and so on and so forth. And so sometimes when you're bringing in new quantities of food that you're not used to, the microorganisms that can eat that, and to Aziz's point, the enzymatic production in your body has to catch up. But then you have the second layer, which is now that population is growing. They're now producing more of a particular metabolite, which might be uncomfortable in excess. And the whole secondary fermentation group has to then grow in order to be able to break down that metabolite. So it's like this entire ecosystem that has to be shifted, that can take some time and that can kind of create some discomfort. And that's why it's important to stick to kind of solid nutritional platforms that have a lot of good science and evidence behind them, but then also obviously work with a physician or nutritionist as you're going through the process just to make sure you're in good shape.
I think you bring up a good point, because I do talk to a lot of my clients, and they'll often say to me, like, how long is this going to take, right? And it's a question that everyone wants to know. And my answer is typically, you didn't come to me with these issues that developed overnight, right? You didn't come to me with chronic constipation that you've had for years. Like, that has been an issue for you for years. So to reverse that is going to take some time. And typically people can start to feel better 2 weeks to a month out, but to really change the composition of what's going on in your microbiome can take quite a while. And I do want to just say one thing before we move on from this. Ben brought up some of the things around intestinal permeability and some big terms that people might not be familiar with. So in our show notes, I will link some information. You may have heard of this called leaky gut. That's the more colloquial name for it. So I'll link to some of that information in our show notes. And we certainly can also link to some other podcast episodes where we've talked in more detail about that.
The one thing I would like to add with respect to how long it will take. As you know, in our total gut balance diet, we did a clinical trial, and we gave people, it's a 4-week trial, and we observed what happens during this period. And we noticed that the first week, people, not feeling too much difference. And then the second week, a little bit better. And by third and fourth week, definitely, they start to see a complete change with respect to their digestive issue, whether it's constipation, bloating, fatigue as well, start to really disappear. People slept better. So I really agree with you, Andrea, with respect to how long it takes. I would say at least it should be 4 weeks to start feeling as a new person, if you will.
Great. Okay, let's move on to a little bit of the questions of diet, because we had a lot of people write in and say, I eat right, or I have balance. We kind of touched on this a bit, but what is diet? When we're about microbiome, do people know what they should be eating? Like, what constitutes a poor diet versus an ideal diet? And then Ben brought up FODMAPs, which we did have some questions around that on. So can we just talk about overall FODMAPs, general diets? Dr. Ghannoum, I know you put together an entire diet plan. So this is a question people really had a lot of questions on.
So can I just set the stage with a couple of just general points on this?
Absolutely.
I think the problem is, and this is not just about diets, it's about everything. We're in a society where everyone wants the secret answer, right? And a lot of times...
Another great point.
Listen, Ben, I'm just going to talk all day and I'm going to have you on my Zoom calls and just, when I make a point. But like, in all seriousness, people want the answer. And a lot of times they'll end up doing things that are extreme. So, a couple of years ago, for example, we saw a subset of women that were reporting like pretty serious digestive symptoms. And when we looked at their microbiome tests, we saw elevated levels of this is fungi zygomycota. Zygomycota, you typically see in people that are immunocompromised, like pretty serious things like cancers, HIVs. But there was enough of these women that we thought, it seems unlikely that there's this many undiagnosed. What we ended up looking at when we dug a little bit deeper into their profiles, they were almost universally cutting out dairy and carbohydrates. Why? Because there's been this messaging that carbohydrates and dairy are just not good for you, right? But guess what? Those are very good prebiotic, probiotic fostering foods, right? So when we saw them start to reintroduce at reasonable levels, guess what? They started to see their digestive symptoms go away, because that to me is one of the best sort of anecdotes I've seen of the problem with the way we typically approach, like dairy, gone. Carbs, terrible. You know what I mean? And the reality is a lot of times the answer is a lot more boring than people want to acknowledge, which is truly moderation, right? So I just wanted to sort of set that tone that like there is no silver bullet. There's things you can definitely do to optimize. But again, sometimes it's not just your digestive tract. Like my dad will tell you, like several people he's dealt with where they seem to eat amazingly, but they're either under extreme stress, they don't sleep well. We've even had, people that are elite athletes or bodybuilders, they don't realize the stress they're putting on their bodies is from over exercising. You know what I mean? So
yeah, to me, I think you really ask a very important question. Okay, what to do? There should be an overall strategy for how you can balance your gut. So what we want to do is basically we need to promote beneficial organisms, both bacteria and fungi. We need them to be there because, as mentioned before, they can work together to help us really digest the food. One organism, for example, break the component, the other one will live on it, and then everybody is happy camper as they are in a little sandbox, okay? So the first thing is promote beneficial organisms. Second, you need to eliminate the bad ones, because the bad ones, those that can produce molecules that are pro-inflammatory, in other words, they'll increase your inflammation. We need to keep them under control, okay? Another thing which is important, we showed in our studies that bacteria and fungus work together and they make what you call digestive plaque. It's like the plaque in your teeth, but it's in your digestive tract. And this will be a problem not only for causing damage and leading to leaky gut, as you mentioned, but also what they can do really, they can inhibit absorption of nutrients. So you need to take a high-level approach. Get rid of the bad ones, encourage the good ones, get rid of this barrier they form, and then let's have good food that have a lot of anti-inflammatory, such as cruciferous vegetables, for example, will be really very, very important, as well as good vitamins to support the growth of the good guys.
One way I would advise people to think of it to make it like a little more engaging, because to Afif's point, moderation is kind of a key aspect of this. I kind of think of that as like you're gardening yourself, right? You've got this ecosystem inside of yourself and you're gardening it for the best outcomes, right? It's like if you've got poisonous plants in there, then they might be toxifying the soil or producing poisonous, berries or something that are going to be bad for your system. If you're taking care of your microbiome in a really good way, then you're gardening for basically success. So I really kind of encourage people to think of it from this like ecosystem standpoint. Another thing that's kind of worthy of note is, and again, I can jump off onto the philosophical deep end a little too often, but it's worthy of noting that there's three relationships. It's super boiled down, but there's three relationships in nature. There's basically mutualistic symbiosis, there's commensal symbiosis, and there's parasitism. So mutualistic symbiosis means that two independent organisms are working together and benefiting each other. Commensal relationship means that one organism is not affected, the other one benefits. And parasitism means one organism benefits and the other one is negatively affected. Because all of these bacteria microorganisms are living for their own reasons, what you're trying to do is create the environment where they maximally align at the greatest numbers to provide benefit to you as the host organism. I think this is one of the big areas as well where nutritional diversity plays in a lot, because there are even times when at certain numbers, certain microorganisms will act beneficially, but at too small of a number, they don't have enough firepower to do so, or at too large of a number, they can actually be problematic. And actually, we see them when we look at microbiome behavior, when certain organisms that are normally beneficial get to a certain size, they engage in something called quorum sensing, and they actually start changing their behavior to be less beneficial. And so this is where this like diversity of nutrient inputs also matters a lot, because not only are you then going to support a really broad range of microorganisms, which means they're going to be more likely to keep each other at reasonable population levels, but you're also getting the added benefit of, with all the different nutrient inputs, you're then getting a lot of different metabolic outputs from fermentation in your digestive tract, which then means you're getting a really broad range of compounds that your body might need, or that might affect different fermenters down the line. So that's kind of like a high level, like interesting philosophical way to think about it. And then, obviously, like this is also where like genetic plays a part. Like, if you do have awareness of what your personal ancestry is, it can be useful to then look at what a more indigenous diet is for your particular ancestral track, because that might be a little better of a fit for your body. And then, and then to that point around like moderation. So then don't overdo it on fats and meats. I think you want to have at least like 70 to 80% plant foods is kind of like a general good rule of thumb, including carbohydrates. But then obviously the quality of those and the diversity of those inputs also matters a lot. So you can be eating carbs from Pop-Tarts, or you can be eating carbs from like wild rice and black rice and quinoa. And that, makes like a really huge difference. Obviously, not only in your microbiome, but also metabolically in terms of your blood sugar response.
So I want to pick two things that Ben talked about, which really very interesting. I love your idea of the garden, okay? Yeah. Because I tell people, your gut is like your own garden. If you want to have roses, you need to give them good fertilizers while we are trying to kill the weeds. So it's really what I want to add to what you said is that it's all in your hand. It depends how you feed it, what's your lifestyle, and you'll be able to do this change. The other thing which you really brought up, which is very interesting, is related to the balance. And I can give you an example with Candida. Candida, which is a yeast, and as you know, people know about it because of thrush and other systemic infection. But when we have it in our gut at low levels, it can work with bacteria to help each other. Like we talked about, one will break down one component, let's say a complex carbohydrate. The other will use that byproduct to produce something else where, again, the bacteria will benefit, the one which started the whole cycle. But really what's important about this is you need to keep the good guys survive very well, because if you don't have this balance where they help each other, let's say you take an antibiotic and then you kill all the good bacteria, which keeping Candida under control, and then we have Candida overgrowth and we have big issues. So this really balance is very, very important, what you were talking about, Ben.
Yeah, thanks so much. One other thing I'll quickly point out, and I'm really happy that, this is actually one of the reasons why I love jumping on with you guys, because, you have a probiotic product, but you're still so focused around, the dietary inputs and the prebiotics and like the full spectrum, which I think is really important. One of the reasons why Olipop does not have probiotics in it, but it has instead, fiber and prebiotics and botanical extracts, which have different kind of beneficial compounds, is because, this is where probiotics kind of comes into the mix. It's going back to that garden analogy. If you kind of think about the microorganisms as the plants, then your nutritional inputs, like what you're eating, even the stress you put on your body, because that ends up, becoming part of the profile. Because if you get stressed, you're producing all these stress hormones. Well, those stress hormones get metabolized somewhere, right? And they get metabolized actually, including in the body, but also in the digestive tract. Those different nutrient inputs is like the soil health, the air quality, the amount of water, all of these different pieces. So if basically if you take care of a plot of land like a forest, for example, the soil's really healthy, the air is really healthy. So a lot of beneficial stuff kind of intrinsically grows. You don't really have to manage it as tightly by planting a bunch of bushes and trees because this ecosystem's kind of taking care of itself. Obviously, it's more complicated than that because of how we have.
No, but Ben, I think that's very important because a lot of times when people talk about probiotics, they're talking about externally adding probiotics, but the reality is your body has an entire native, what's that term?
Population.
Yeah, like where it's
native. This is really commensal organisms. They are there, native to your gut.
Yeah, so exactly. So part of what you're getting at is
normal flora, sort of. Again, another word, Afif.
Yeah, but they're not external. Your body has them internally. So one of the things you want to do is encourage the growth of what's in there already, right? And yes, of course, you can add additional probiotics to that. But the analogy I always use is prebiotics are like topsoil.
Yes, absolutely.
The Microbiome Report is brought to you by BIOHM Supergreens, a supergreens formula that combines 31 supergreens with prebiotic digestive enzymes and BIOHM probiotics, giving you a supercharge in a single scoop. To check out BIOHM Supergreens, go to biohmhealth.com. That's BIOHM Health.com. And make sure to use the code BIOHM10 to get 10% off of your order. We had a bunch of questions about, I'm a healthy, 22-year-old with a balanced diet. I'm a healthy individual who exercises and eats right. Do I need to be taking a supplement? Like, what do probiotics actually do? Are they good for everyone?
So the way, and we were talking off air about this is the way to think about not just probiotics, but frankly, any supplements, right? They should be a supplement to your diet, what you're doing dietarily. That's literally why they're called dietary supplements, right? Because the idea originally was that it's hard to necessarily get all the vitamins and supplements you need just from your diet, so you can supplement it with dietary supplements. So the problem is, and we see this oftentimes when people are testing, they want to know, well, which product should I take? Which product? And we're saying, listen, take a step back. You shouldn't think about any product till you get your dietary house in order, because once you do that, then you can start adding these things in, right? So I really think the way that people need to think about all supplements, not just probiotics, is that they should be a complement to what you're doing with your actual diet. Now, beyond that, to your question, like, is someone who's healthy, do they even necessarily need these? The analogy I like to use, and my dad talked about it earlier about oral plaque, but it's really oral care, right? So like everybody's got that uncle that hasn't gone to the dentist in like 15 years and he never gets a cavity, right? Like he just genetically has very good oral health, right? But then we also know that person that has cavities all the time, despite doing everything they can to maintain healthy teeth. In all scenarios though, we daily maintain our oral health. Why? Because the oral cavity, much like the digestive tract, is very dynamic. You have saliva, you have food, you have a lot of stresses coming in and out of the oral cavity. So we constantly maintain our oral health to keep it all in balance, even if you have strong oral care or a little weaker genetically, right? It's the same in the digestive tract. When you are thinking about maintaining your oral health, your digestive health through your diet, you also should consider what supplements can keep you maintaining, because your microbiome is constantly under stress. And it's not just about, diet, there's environmental factors, there's stress. So we've seen probiotics and digestive health as a category almost starting to be treated like multivitamins, where it's just part of a ongoing routine as part of an overall healthy lifestyle.
So really, to be honest, the way to look at it simply is, as we mentioned about the garden, it is in your hands. Try to pick the right food so that you feed not only our host cells, but also the good bacteria and the good fungus so that they thrive there and help us maintain our health. Now, if you take, for example, an antibiotics, what you are doing, you are killing some of the good guys, okay? And in this case, having a supplement where you have, let's say, probiotic will be good, because you are trying to help your body to rebuild back because of what happens because of the antibiotic. Okay. Also, if you have to have an antibiotic, it will be a good idea to take a narrow spectrum antibiotic. In other words, you don't want to have a complete and utter destruction of all organisms. Let's go target the bad ones, the pathogen only. And this will be, narrow spectrum antibiotics will be much better. And then adding a nutritional supplement, adding some vitamins will really be very helpful.
So and again, I might be a slightly the odd man out, and I'm also not a doctor, so take my input with like a limited kind of like consideration from the research that I've looked at. There's basically, I forget the name of the institute. I think it's like the Weizmann Institute, something like that, out of Israel. They just did a pretty big meta-analysis, for example, on antibiotic usage and supplementing with probiotics afterwards. From their data, and again, that's just one data set, what they concluded is that there's actually a number of cases where consuming probiotics after a course of antibiotics actually elongated the time period for full balance recovery. So I do think there is some mixed science there in terms of like exactly the right way to recover from antibiotic use. And again, I'm not a doctor, and there's a lot of data out there, so you should kind of try to figure it out for yourself. I think, the other thing I'll point to with this is, it's like, if you're getting a really balanced diet, with a lot of diversity, and you're supporting a bunch of different natural microorganisms, there is a lot of intrinsic redundancy by design built into the microbiome. There are cases where there are important native bacteria, native microorganisms like we were referring to earlier, that over time with a refined or processed diet can be permanently lost. And there is good data that would show that if those are reintroduced, you would see a meaningful benefit. The challenge is just that we don't know exactly yet, because again, to the point that Afif made earlier, microbiome science in general is this kind of rapidly expanding field. So the problem is that we don't totally know yet which microorganisms each individual person, could be construed as missing and beneficial to bring back into the body. And then even then we have to do safety tests on them. So, the area of probiotics itself becomes a little bit complicated. I don't think there's certainly no harm in taking probiotics, especially if you have a good probiotic like BIOHM that actually gets to where it needs to go to in the digestive tract and provides benefit. But I think my only concern with this, and this is more just something that I've thought about, I don't know how supported by science this is, which is probably obnoxious for me to say in the first place, but I do have a little bit of a concern for individuals who are in this position where they're having this leaky gut because they're not kind of properly attending to their diet and to their stress, and then they take a bunch of probiotics. Well, if the underlying issue is that there's already basically too many microorganismal mouths to feed and not enough food to feed them, and that is contributing to...
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think you're touching on a bigger issue, which is the place of supplements generally in health and wellness. And I think the problem is a lot of times people that are well-meaning and they're trying to be very thoughtful about the medications they expose themselves to, and be just thoughtful about their approach to wellness, sometimes they will err on the side of trying to get health through supplements versus medication, right? Yeah. So sometimes what you're talking about, that's not something that a supplement really has a place to solve, right? Sometimes you can have, a candida infection, something like that. You need medication. That's not to be solved by a probiotic. So that's something that I think is, a bigger issue. I remember. Oh, go ahead then.
No. Also, to frame the same thing in a different way, you really need to address the underlying causes for a given digestive issue. Like having a probiotic without trying to get rid of the underlying issue, for example, if we have stress, for example, is not going to help you. So I think probiotic supplement, it is something which you can use to really support what you are trying to do. But if you think it's the pill that is going to cure you, I think this is not the way to go.
That's actually a great segue into one of our other questions, which is, what is the best course of action to take when trying to figure out gut issues? Where do people start with this?
So that's a little bit of a tricky question. I think, let me start by sharing this. Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine's here in Cleveland, where we are. We know a number of the people that work over there. One of the most interesting things I've heard was that you can't even see a physician in the Center for Functional Medicine until you go through their nutrition intervention. And some crazy stat, like 80% of people end up never having to see a physician. Do you see what I'm saying? So a lot of times—
That is awesome piece of information.
Isn't it crazy?
Yeah,
like that blew my mind. Because it's really reframing how we address our wellness, right? Because you could have one answer to your first question, Andrea, is, well, you should go see your doctor, or you should, get on a treatment course for X, Y, and Z symptom, or you should take this antacid, whatever it might be, right? And sometimes that is the right
Don't take antacids. Don't do that one.
But sometimes the right answer is, yep, just as I was saying before, if you have an infection, you need medication. But a lot of times people, again, I use a framework of our own tests because we see their diet. We can see that they have not really tried to optimize their diet ahead of taking a microbiome test, ahead of trying products. You know what I mean? So again, I think the first thing people need to do is really take an honest look at their diet, their lifestyle, and whether they're doing everything they can to optimize. Now, if they are, then yeah, I think it's worth, assuming you don't know you have some underlying issue, look at other options, talk to, a physician, a functional medicine practitioner, to really start to get to, a solution. But I think sometimes people jump too quickly to silver bullet,
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'm going to do for this question specifically, so all of the questions that we have been asked that have a corresponding podcast episode or some resources we can send people to, I will link to that in the show notes at biohmhealth.com. So for this question, I will link specifically to some of the episodes that I think are the best for getting started with this, because we have talked ad nauseum really about all of these things, and everything from sleep to exercise to diet, and really what to start eating to shift this balance. So okay, we are coming up on time, and I do want to ask just two more questions that multiple people wrote in about. So the first one is, what foods are easiest and what foods are hardest to process and digest?
Okay, so I'll have a go at that. I think the food that are easiest to process include very ripe bananas, cantaloupe, melons, avocado, for example. As you know, everybody loves avocados these days. Also, applesauce. And if you cook food without skin or seed, these are really also easy to process. Now, the ones that are hard to really process include the cruciferous vegetables. The best examples are broccoli and cabbage. And also, the higher the fiber content of a food ingredient, the more it is hard to digest. So you can see we are going from watermelon, which as a Lebanese, my dad used to buy all these watermelons at the start of the summer, and we eat them, and they are basically, it's like water. So it's very easy to process. Whereas the others, as I mentioned, the broccoli, they are fantastic, but they are really hardest to process.
And where does meat and fish fall into on that spectrum?
I would say fish is much easier to break down or to process, because, as you know, fish is more softer. It does not have all these muscle type of material which you find in the meat. It's much harder, and that's really if I put the two, I would say the fish is much easier to process compared to the meat, which will take a little bit more.
And then the last question we have here. So we had a lot of specific questions about different disease states, which we don't have time to get into each of them individually, but I am at risk of insert something. So hypothyroidism, colon cancer, Alzheimer's, heart disease. Can healing my gut help lower the risk of this problem?
So first thing I'd say is, gigantic disclaimer, you should not do any approach outside of talking to your healthcare practitioner. That sounds like a cliche thing to say, but I think it's very important. And the reason I say that is I will never forget, I was at a conference and I heard this woman and she gave a talk, which was basically like, don't let your wellness get in the way of your wellness. And she started experiencing symptoms and feel well, literally turned to supplements, probiotics, because she was feeling digestive issues. By the time she actually went to see a physician, she had stage 3 or stage 4 colon cancer, right? And her message was basically that she was ignoring these giant warning signs because she didn't want to, sort of go the quote unquote traditional Western medicine approach. And by the time she got there, she actually was in an awful state of health, right? So like, I think any of these things, it's a giant caution flag that you should not look at, if you can somehow balance your microbiome as an alternative to getting proper treatment, because we understand, like collectively, I'm sure the four of us, like why people are so wary of making sure that they're thoughtful about medication. And everybody always talks about antibiotics, but you know what? Sometimes you need those things.
100%. 100%.
And so that's that. You can never lose sight of that. So it's almost like I almost don't want to answer the question because it should never, ever be a substitute for a methodical path. Now, along the way, there's no reason to not try and do everything you can to optimize your microbiome. It clearly can't hurt, but it should never be a substitute or a first place you start if you're looking at an issue like that.
At a disease. Let me also try to address a little bit your overall question, Andrea. Your microbiome play an important role in your gut health as well as overall health because of the gut-brain axis or gut-skin-brain axis, okay? So if you have disturbance in your microbiome, you are going to affect it, communicate with your brain, and then you will start to have the stress level increase and this sort of thing. And we have the other way around. If you are stressed, it's going to cause dysbiosis in your gut. Now, when you look more specifically about the thyroid, your gut health, there is a really strong correlation between thyroid and gut health. In fact, there are some studies which showed that if you have low thyroid hormones, this could lead to leaky gut, which, as we said before, really organisms from the gut then can go in much easier into your bloodstream and cause problems. At the same time, because of this, you are going to have poor gut health, can also suppress your thyroid function. So it's two-way street.
Basically, it's just worthy of noting, essentially there's two schools of thought on medicine and oftentimes they're pitted against each other, but I think that's pretty silly. They're actually quite complementary, right? So there's allopathic medicine, which is more intervention-based, medical model, and there's naturopathic medicine, which is kind of more preventative and lifestyle oriented and focuses less on kind of symptomology and like germ theory and focuses more on ecosystem and terrain management. And they really are quite complementary. As a society, we've invested really heavily in the allopathic interventional route. And so it's developed and it's quite efficient at what it does. It has a particular tool set. And same thing, naturopathic medicine broadly is slightly less, it's thought of as being less credible. It's a little bit more of a Wild West in terms of actual certifications and even some scientific research, which I think is a huge shame because both systems are valid and have their place. So I'll give you a perfect example. Like it's been an insane year for a lot of different reasons. Our company's growing by like 1,000%, like pandemic. So I was having like chest pains recently and I'm like in my mid 30s. So I'm thinking I'm probably fine. But my father's father died of a heart attack. And so I was nervous. So I did go see my primary physician and I got a physical, I got an EKG, I had my blood drawn, I got a comprehensive panel. I ended up being perfectly fine, right? So I was able to say, all right, this is probably really just like stress and physiological tension. So what I did, as I focused on now, I took a little trip. I'm actually out of the office right now. I'm in the mountains of Colorado. I'm trying to work from the road to actually find like a different way to manage my stress. I'm like hitting like the sauna a lot and that stuff's helping, voila, the chest pain is down. So I think that, there is this kind of hand in hand to Afif's point, which I think is very, very very wise, you want to have that kind of backstop where you are getting kind of this interventional oversight. So if you do have an underlying infection that needs antibiotics, you use them. If you do need blood work, if you do need modern medicine, you just make sure you're getting covered off there. But once you're getting covered off there, then it's just, kind of plowing through the kind of wild west of naturopathic information to approach your life, in this kind of balanced way between diet and stress. Another thing that other people, and we don't possibly have time to get into this right now, but I'm really big on addressing trauma. Trauma is this major thing that affects the physiological system, the mental system, sticks around in the neurology, it sticks around in the physiology, and it causes super long-term stress. As a country, we sweep trauma under the rug and we don't deal with it. But that's another major place that physical disruption and microbiome disruption can come from, and also meaningfully increases potential disease outcomes. And there's a ton of good data based on that as well. So I think looking at all of that kind of holistically, you'll have as good of an approach, whether you're healthy or whether you're at risk for a specific disease, as anybody could have.
The last thing I'll add,
go ahead.
Quasi-supported by science is sauna will change your life.
Actually, thermal cycling is one of my sauna to cold plunge. It's such a game changer for your nervous system.
Ben and I have literally done this together.
We have done this together. It's absolutely my jam.
That's great.
This is how us nerdy health people find fun.
I tell you something. I really liked what you said at the end, Ben, regarding the going out to the mountain and whatever. My approach all the time, I tell people, listen, go take hikes, go take your dog for a walk, relax. I even tell them about yoga. Andrea will laugh at this because I always say, I go to these yoga classes and I'm the only male there. And I think men are missing a big part with respect to yoga because it's so relaxing. You need to de-stress. You need to do some meditation during the day. It is not just about, let's keep going, and about food and this sort of thing. We need to relax a little bit. And then just to end up, and it's not a matter of advertising, I just submitted a paper called Microbiome-Driven Approach to Manage or Ease the depression during the COVID because of all what's going on.
Very cool.
And hopefully, if it's get published, we will share it with Andrea, because I really think we need to help people now at this hard time and always give them hope and the importance of, as you say, dealing with trauma, talking with the family, help yourself, because this is the way we are going to be all fine.
Couldn't agree more.
This was excellent, you guys. Thank you so much. And we will link to everything that we've talked about today, and even things that we didn't touch on. I will have a whole list of resources on the show notes page. Even Ben, to your point about trauma here at the end, we did an entire episode with Dr. Keisha Ewers about trauma and the microbiome and overall health. So we'll certainly link to that. It's all at biohmhealth.com. Remember, it's BIOHM. And then if you guys liked this episode and you want to hear more Ask Me Anything episodes and have other questions, let us know. Shoot me an email, the Microbiome Report at biohmhealth.com, and we can get another one of these scheduled. So, guys, thanks so much. Be well.
Most welcome. Thank you. Thanks
Real
for
pleasure
having
being
us.
on with you guys.
Likewise. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us a rating and review. I've included a clickable link in the show description to make it easy peasy for you to do so. Again, check out the comprehensive show notes for this and all episodes at biohmhealth.com/pages/podcast. And again, remember, BIOHM is BIOHM. Until next time, I'm Andrea Wien.